Good morning, guys. Today we're going to talk about climate change and its impacts on landscape. We're going to focus on the global aspects of it and the hydroclimatic changes, along with storms, the difference in latitudes, and how each section is affected by certain climate changes. We'll also focus on some regional aspects, such as the western U.S. and the slope stability from the increased precipitation, and the different what affects what where. As I said earlier, it's topography is massive when it comes to the difference in weather and climates and everything like that. We'll also talk about the effects on people and the warming of the Arctic. So some global impacts we'll focus on. As you can see the picture to the right, it's going to be the increased frequency of precipitation, so the increase of storms, and a lot of the time storms, especially here in Florida, can grow and be more destructive with warmer waters. With the warmer waters, they tend to grow, their wind, they don't get sheared as much when they shear when they hit land. So when they're in the water, the warmer water, it tends to just form more rain, more winds, and just make it, could be possibly torrential and just not have some very bad impacts. We also notice up north, we don't notice it down here in Florida obviously, but the reduced snow and ice coverage, we notice that. We'll talk about that later in the Arctic warming, but when we notice even the changes from the north when that snow melts. When the snow melts, it increases the water level, and we notice the sea level rising due to that melted ice down here in Florida. South Florida is almost completely underwater due to flooding, erosion, and just storm runoff. They're in a very difficult crisis, very bad crisis down in South Florida due to the sea level rising from the melted snow from up north. And with that melted snow, with the warmer temperatures, snow doesn't stay snow. It then becomes rain, increasing the water. And you can even notice that in your cup of water. If you have a cup of water and you put ice in it, the water can be cold for a little bit, but it eventually melts the ice. So if things are warming, that ice isn't going to be able to stay ice, especially with the increased water on top of it. Even though we have an increase of high rain percentage, there's still a drought risk, and a drought risk can increase fire, water, and deplete water resources as well. And with the rain also, we tend to notice runoff of fertilizers and other contaminants that will contaminate the waters, the rivers, the seas, and the lakes, and really anywhere in the world where there's an increase of that precipitation. And that can lead to, as you see in the picture, it says nutrient cycling and sediment exchange. And the algal bloom to the right, we notice that a lot here in Florida. We have what we call the red tide down on our West Coast beaches, and it will take over our beaches for months at a time. And it will just damage us economically, because the West Coast beaches, really any of our beaches, are our biggest tourist sites. So if we have algal blooms taking over our beaches, then that stops people from coming to visit. Sorry. So with the rain, all of that is caused by hydroclimatic changes. There's the increase of evaporation, then goes to the atmosphere and increases water vapor, which increases the precipitation. And like I said, then that goes into runoff into our rivers and lakes, sediment runoff, groundwater flow, and everything. It just could change our entire landscape as we know it. And speaking of landscape, a lot of topography changes will affect, because obviously up in the mountains it's colder than where we are at sea level or slightly above sea level. Florida is pretty much sea level, and that's about all we got. So we don't see a lot of landslides or rockfalls, but I'd travel much to the north, Tennessee, and really those western states. And as you can see here, western U.S. and slope stability is a large thing, because with the increased rain and which leads to landslides and rockfalls, and that can be an impact on housing, people. Rocks can fall on cars if they're driving by the mountain. I've seen it myself, a rock fall on a car, and it is probably the scariest thing ever, because it's just uncontrolled nature that we are impacting due to our impacts on the climate. climate. And I've also haven't personally seen a landslide, but I've had friends that lived in Puerto Rico when the storms came through, and they sent me videos of the landslides destroying homes and just the damage it had on their entire community. It destroyed their farmlands, their businesses, their highways. Everything was just shut down. They had no power, they had no water. So all of these things, these storms are so bad due to the increase, which lead to all these different cycle of effects, like the landslides and the rockfalls. So with all of this that's happening, it can impact the people and the ecosystems in the area, as well as animals unable to tolerate or adapt to the changes, which lead to vulnerability, endangerment, and extinction. And then as we go further into the PowerPoint, we will talk again about that Arctic warming. So when we talk about the people and effects, not just their housing and livelihood, it also impacts their livelihood by having that increased ozone in the lower atmosphere, which is found to increase the health risks and respiratory risks. So it increases your asthma, your COPD, and many other things, which can lead to cardiovascular and your neurological system to have issues. So it can lead to other health effects that we probably haven't even connected to our climate change yet. Living here in the villages, I see asthma and COPD probably almost every day that I'm at work. It's a major issue. And as I said before, the economic stability. So when we see storms really anywhere, the wildfires, the hurricanes, the tornadoes, the floods, that is going to cause government funding. So whether it be from our state, whether it be federal, whatever it may be, that there has to be some type of funding in order to help the community that has been impacted by a natural disaster. So they have to figure out their budget for that, as well as what resources are needed and how quickly. And also with those natural resources, we have to focus on what's our water availability, how's the farms, are the soils drying and drying out our farms, are our crop yields bad? It's just a lot of things that the government will have to figure out. And the landslides will do damage to property, and will pull up things out of the dirt that will cause health risks. It causes economic damage due to rebuilding of houses and natural and resources needed. And it could also damage your water lines, farms, and everything like that, leading to that natural resource focus. So we'll move on to Arctic amplification. As you can see on the chart on the screen, our ocean is going to be the slowest warming part of the Earth. The ocean is so vast and such a large part of the Earth that it takes so much to warm it, because if you have ever been in a deep pool or even just like the deep ocean and you're a diver, you can tell that the temperature drops. It's very hard for that sun and that warmth to get down to that surface. But it's happening. It's happening, but it's slow. So a lot of people will say, oh, well, nothing's happening because the ocean's still warm. I can tell you that on a cold, rainy day, that water is freezing. But by the middle of the day, especially here in Florida, you're already like burning up in the water still. And it's not as refreshing. Kind of tastes like kind of feels like gross bath water. But studies have been showing that the Arctic, due to the acceleration in the temperatures and the melting in the ice, the Arctic has been found to be warming about 4 times the average of the world, that the rest of the world is warming. And so with that warming comes ice loss and decreased reflectability of the planet. So when you have the beautiful white ice lands, ice sheets and glaciers and everything like that, that white surface allows the sun to reflect off of the land and go back up into space, which decreases the temperature of the Earth, allowing warming to decrease, which is what we talk about in my paper for the climate mitigation. We talk about the possibilities of solar radiation management and how we could inject chemicals into the stratosphere, which will increase reflectability, as long with making something also known as making the cloud particles bigger, which cause it to be more white and therefore more reflective. There's also focus on the decrease of CO2 so that there's not such trapped gases in the air, and it goes into a whole span like that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, and if you have any questions, feel free to comment on my post, but thank you.